Hi, friends. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Hello APGD, a neighborhood podcast about the Audubon Park Garden District in Orlando, Florida. I'm your host, Michael Lothrop, and today we'll be speaking with Seth Daniels, co-founder of Freehand Goods at East End Market. If you can't make it into the shop, please visit them at freehandgoods.com or on Facebook and Instagram. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, or if you'd like to be a sponsor, please feel free to message me on Instagram at HelloAPGDPod. Thank you for listening. This episode is brought to you in part by Trevor Brown, Audubon Park resident and trusted Central Florida realtor with Fannie Hillman and Associates, proudly serving their clients for over 40 years. For listings, market trends, helpful home buyer and seller tips, email directly to Trevor at fanniehillman.com or find him on Instagram at Trevor Brown Realtor. And with me today is Seth Daniels, co-founder, leathersmith, and perfumer at Freehand Goods at East End Market. Welcome, Seth.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael.
Do you go by perfumer, or is that a new title that I'm just going to add to you?
I guess I've never truly been called that, but I did, in fact, formulate most of the original fragrances. A lot of the grooming stuff these days I've passed on to my business partner and or actually employees that we train up in that. But I guess the originals do still come from he and I.
That process, I'm very interested in learning more about that. And I saw that you have a Florida man and Florida woman fragrance. I'm very curious as to what a Florida man and a Florida woman smell like. Like, how did you come up with the inspiration for that?
Those are interesting because, while the labels and the names and the whole idea of them are rather comical, and I think that is in fact what draws a lot of people to it, especially online sales of something like a personal fragrance. Obviously, you can't test it.
Florida has its own character, right? And people are like fascinated by what how interesting we are.
They are, absolutely, right? And I think they're also drawn to everyone's different interpretation of like why it's cool / embarrassing to be Floridian, and taking it with a grain of salt and a little bit of humor.
Yeah.
But the funny thing about them is that being the case, they're actually very complex and I like to think well-crafted fragrances. Most of what we pulled as far as being Florida-inspired were, well, I guess all of it from nature. A lot of the obvious things like citrus notes and things like that, but then a lot of like woods and like earth and kind of notes, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, Florida is just such a distinct ecosystem, and it's like, I think that is one of the fascinating things is, people think about alligators all the time and, reptiles, the things that thrive here and the bird life. And it's kind of its own thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a lot of florals too that are either native or have, I guess, been forced native to Florida that I don't really think a lot of people know about.
Yeah.
And I did pull some of that or some of those elements into creating those fragrances.
That's so cool. Yeah, I need to come into the shop and sample that and see what a Florida man and a Florida woman smell like.
Yeah, I imagine it maybe doesn't ring true to that necessarily.
Yeah.
But maybe, I don't know, the churched up version of a Florida man and Florida woman.
Yeah. Well, I think it works. You guys do a really great job of just, branding and marketing, but also, your products are all natural. They're very well made, well crafted, and, getting back to that like connection with the craftsmanship and the person who actually made the thing, and that it's durable and it's going to last. I have one of your wallets, and it's like one of my favorite things that I own now. And it's like, it's the nicest wallet I've ever bought, and it'll probably last me forever, which is so cool. But I might get another one when this one kind of wears down. But yeah, it's
absolutely, pretty much everything you're saying is exactly the hope. Like I want all my products, anything I make, to last, as long as possible. And then if not, or if even, I don't know, out of boredom, people to return. and get another one.
Yeah,
I guess
and I
that's
love
how business works.
it is. It is. I mean, and that can be the problem of making something too good, right? It's
Yeah.
like planned obsolescence in manufacturing is something that, has kept us consumers like rebuying and throwing stuff away. And that's
Yeah.
obviously not sustainable. And you guys are all about sustainability. And I love also that at your shop you have examples of wallets that have been worn, or carried for like a year, so you can kind of see how it ages.
Yeah.
So cool.
That is one of my favorite things, and it has actually made, I guess, the selling of things, or at least the talking about of the products, easier.
Yeah.
In that, I would venture to say it's about 50-50 split anyone in our store shopping for leather goods, either knowing about and wanting that natural patina process to happen, and they specifically want the one that it's going to be the most obvious.
I did
on.
also. I was like, I want to buy this one. No, I can't. All right, I got to make my own by wearing it, having it.
And then the other half are they don't know about that at all, and they might, especially something like the natural colorway, which is totally raw, no dye. It's skin colored, basically, very, very light. They like that, but they want it to stay like that forever. And sometimes it's kind of hard to explain that without a visual. So it's really nice to, any of our employees can now just point those out and be like, well, this is naturally going to happen because of the tannage of the leather, and it's just sort of how it's made,
Yeah. Or, and how they wear down jeans and sell them at a premium, maybe people that want that new looking wallet can bring theirs in, trade it towards credit, and then you can sell the used wallet for a premium.
No, that's an idea.
Who knows? Yeah. But either way, how did you get started in leather making? What kind of spurred that?
That is a very specific answer. Motorcycles, actually.
Okay.
A lot of my friends and I had found our way into motorcycle culture over the years. And I had seen these like hand-tooled, hand-painted, real intricate, chopper seats. And I didn't have, the 10 grand to buy one for myself because they are very pricey.
Yeah.
So I figured I'd just make one. I grew up in a woodworking family. I always kind of worked with my hands. Maybe I'm a little artistic.
I think so.
So I don't thank you. I thought I'm sure I can figure this out. And I actually found on eBay Antiques from like the early 50s this old, it's called Tandy Leather now, the store. It used to be called the Leather Factory, and they would put out these like beginner kits, and it was like, the basic 5, tools and, little like wooden mallet and some scraps, and it was like basically a learn how to do leather craft kit.
Wow.
So I got that. It was like $200 because it was being sold as an antique, and it came with like a 5-page little booklet.
Wow.
And I taught myself actually with that, and then other books that I also found on eBay Antiques, just about leathercraft, because at that point, leathercraft was essentially dead. Because one has to know that I started doing this about 18 years ago.
Wow.
And then strangely, slowly, as I was teaching myself and I think getting better and better, I think a lot of other people around the world somehow are doing the exact same thing. And we've sort of now found ourselves, as of the last few years, in this, what I call a leather renaissance.
Yeah.
Because
there's
now
there's a community, right?
Absolutely. A worldwide community. There's thousands of YouTube videos on every possible technique you can imagine. It's very easy to learn now.
Yeah.
Which is the exact opposite of when I learned. I taught myself 100% everything I know.
Yeah.
Just
but
from
you
these old
probably got
books.
better because of all of the trial and error, right? And just figuring it out.
I like to think so, because the example I give my apprentices now is not to try to find shortcuts, because as of pretty much now, the last almost 20 years of doing it, I've made every mistake there is to make. And thus I know how to correct almost any mistake that happens. And that doesn't really happen if, you're using, weird shortcut tools, or I don't know, whatever techniques that might exist out there nowadays that achieve flawless results just the first time. I feel like it doesn't really ingrain in you the understanding of the process, why this is working, and then also, how to fix it when it doesn't work,
That
or
makes
if it's
sense.
done the wrong way.
So not just the techniques, but also kind of the science behind it, like kind of understanding why something works or why something does not.
Absolutely. And I feel like that's really important because there's a lot of nuance to quote unquote getting good at something like leathercraft, because I feel like, at least for me, it's sort of like the passing of this goal line where the tools are no longer in your hands; they're actually an extension of your hands.
Nice.
Because a lot of it is based on feel, and a lot of it's very, very subtle, really hard to perceive, unless you've done it 10,000 times. It's like creating a muscle memory almost.
Yeah, yeah. It's like that 10,000 hours concept, right?
Yep,
that you
absolutely.
You kind of break through and you find, that groove.
Yeah, a lot of things just kind of click one day.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what he meant. Now I get it.
That's cool. What kind of is there like a discovery that was made at a certain point that you're like, oh, now I get it? I mean, or maybe that was it. It's just that you just are so in the flow that it's not even like you're holding tools. That is just like an extension of you.
There are a few of those that have happened that I actually do specifically remember. I feel like that has to have been the case with almost every tool there is to use and every technique, because most of the tools and techniques are unique to this trade. Like, couldn't really pick up any of my leather crafting tools and do woodworking with them or anything. They're just very specific.
Yeah.
So I honestly don't remember a lot of them, but one specific one I do remember is edge painting, wherein the edge of the leather is quite literally painted with a specific type of acrylic paint, used or made for leatherworking. And you usually only really see it on a lot of like higher end handbags, things like that, at least as far as people realize that they've seen.
Okay.
And we use that technique a little bit, not on a lot of our products, but on some of them, the single piece of leather items, like a catch-all or something, or a watch band. That took me about 5 years to really perfect, and it was a very distinct moment that I felt happen, as I was doing it, applying it. For 5 years straight, I felt like I had zero control over it, and it was always kind of like a guessing game if it was going to come out good or not.
That's a long time to be just kind of winging it, right?
It really is, and that was probably why it took so long, because that exact fact made me afraid to ever do it.
Wow.
Because something like that, there's not really a whole lot of going back if you make a bad enough mistake.
Sure.
And it was, like I said, a very instantaneous, oh, wow, what? I understand this, and I have complete control over this now. How did that happen?
That's amazing. I
and
love
it wasn't
that.
like any specific thing I did or a way I was holding it or anything. It just happened.
Sometimes it's just that like confidence, right? And it's just like you know exactly what to do in every aspect, and you can avoid some of those mistakes, that you were making in the past. And, you obviously want to honor the materials. Like, leather's not cheap, and also it was a living thing before.
Absolutely.
And, you don't want anything to end up in the garbage because,
not at all.
You messed up. So like that can be pretty nerve-wracking. And yeah, just when you go into the shop, like everything is so perfect, and it's like, it's incredible. I remember the first time, walking by your shop, and it was formerly a sushi restaurant, right? It was Capo in there.
Yeah, Capo.
That's quite a changeover. And I remember it's funny because maybe you'll relate to this as a Florida native. When you see something that is sort of unfamiliar to you and you're like, oh, this kind of reminds me of like Epcot, where like there's this guy and he's like a craftsman. He's got all these tools and he's like making this thing by hand. Like it was like a kind of a new experience in a way. And I was so drawn to it. And it's so cool just to witness like the making of these things and then looking at the end products. I know I had a question in there somewhere. Basically, how did you get started in the Space and East End? How did that all go down?
That was, well, maybe not pure serendipity, but I feel like being in the right place at the right time had a lot to do with that. Jacob, my business partner, and I had met about, 8 months or so prior to that. I had actually made a couple leather goods for his retail store that he used to have called Outfitters Ave, just off Park Avenue. We had a mutual friend who heard that he was looking for leather goods, and he knew that I'd made leather goods, and So he put us in contact, and I made a few things for his store, and they did so well so quickly that he suggested that we, maybe try to make something of this. And I just happened to have been a barber for the last 5 years, and had been tinkering with certain, shaving and grooming products. So I had a little bit of that knowledge too. So we started with a very, very small amount of things. It was like 3 wallet designs, maybe a belt, a couple T-shirts, and like we said, it was like 3 shaving products, I think, that I had figured out at that point. And Jacob had been tinkering with candles. So we took that sort of ragtag bunch of things, and we got this old military trailer. Had 2 wheels, so it was like a seesaw. You had to always have it connected to a truck or something.
Yeah.
And we just toted that around to different events and farmers markets and, wherever they would have us, basically. And after doing that for a couple months, we landed this gig, I guess, a month-long weekend pop-up at East End Market, just in the parking lot. It's where they have the food trucks now, basically.
Gotcha.
They used to have all kinds of different businesses do that, and it would be for a month straight, but only Saturday and Sunday. And we did that. John Reif, the owner of the market, he really liked what we were doing and what we were about, and I guess other things about us too. And so obviously he knew that the capo space was about to free up, and he actually offered it to us. And it was pretty much at that point that Jacob and I had the conversation entailing or realizing that this is kind of like the do or die moment. Like we either jump in and do this 100% or we don't at all, because that's what it would obviously take to have only 2 people and a store that's open 7 days a week.
Yeah. And you're committing to a brick and mortar, but you're also part of this bigger thing that's bringing in people, which is kind of perfect because, especially with Lineage right there, and you get your coffee and you're, waiting for them to craft your coffee. And then you're like, what's this shop about? Like, it's kind of,
that is an exact point that we have made numerous times over the years.
Yeah.
I think we really there was a lot of luck involved in that. It being that exact spot, let alone that exact market. I don't think there's a better place a brand like us could possibly be than the East End Market, that now draws so much daily traffic and that puts so many eyes on you. Being a small company, obviously, people don't know us across the world or anything. We're not at that point yet. But with the internet, anything is possible, right? that is true, and we're learning that very quickly.
Yeah.
But that exact instance, like you mentioned, people waiting at Farm and House and at Lineage, for their food or for their coffee, and us being immediately right there to the left, they turn and say, "Oh, what's going on in here? What's that?"
Yeah.
And especially since at that point, in the whole first 3 years, that my workshop was in that tiny little space, kind of crammed in the back, and I ran the shop and made all the stuff right there. And so that definitely, I believe, created a draw, because people would see me, like you said, doing this old world thing and it not looking familiar at all, because it in fact is a very old sort of craft and it hasn't really changed much. And that just sort of drew people in, and they talked to me, and I like talking to people, so I would tell them what I was doing, and they would ask me a lot of the same questions you're asking me, and I'm always happy to answer them, because I feel like it's kind of a fun story. And I also felt like it gave a lot of people hope too, because I don't have any special training or anything. I just liked something enough to learn it, and just kind of kept doing it, and somehow I made a career out of it now. And even 6 years later, it's still very humbling and almost kind of surreal that this is what I do, like all day, every day.
It's a rare thing, now that the marketplace with Amazon and all these box stores and things that are mass produced, thinking about competing with those behemoths, it's like you do have to specialize, you do have to make something distinct and different. And I think that part of what people are drawn to with things that are handmade is the joy that goes into it.
Absolutely.
They
can see it on you. They can hear it in your voice when you talk about it.
100%.
It's like seeing a band, and if they're just standing there and they look bored, it's not a fun show.
It's not. I distinctly remember some shows like that, and I know touring is difficult, but yeah, if you're on stage and you're miserable, it's hard to watch.
It is. It comes through.
Yeah.
Very, very much so.
Yeah.
And that actually hits the nail on the head for me, at least, of exactly why I love Orlando and why to me, it's grown in such a positive way, because that mindset of that, extreme corporate shopping, that, at least in this microcosm, has been defeated by the want and need to support locally, to support, artisan made anything, goods, foods, clothes. It's such a social norm now, that it's almost unbelievable, because, like I said, I've been doing this for 15 years before we started this business, and never got much of anywhere with it outside of like the motorcycle community.
Sure.
And then one day something clicked, and everybody in Orlando seemed to like that type of thing, and to support that type of business. And I mean, that's the whole reason why any of us are here doing what we're doing and doing what we love.
Yeah.
Because that support system is there, and it's so incredibly consistent.
Yeah. And I think that your audience it's not going to be everybody, but that's okay, because you're building these items at basically capacity. I'm sure it's like, I understand when you got your start, you basically sold out in 2 weeks and had to kind of ramp up production just to keep up with the demand, because people haven't really seen things like this before. And, I love that you guys are really focusing on Florida apparel. And I know the original intent was stuff for men specifically, but I know you've kind of branched out from there. How did that evolution come to be?
Well, it was something we definitely knew would probably be beneficial and even necessary at some point. From the beginning, the goal wasn't necessarily to have a men's goods store. It was just all we knew.
Okay. Yeah.
We were basically just making things that we liked.
Sure.
Like, hey, if I like this, then somebody else might probably like this.
Yeah.
And then once it got to a point where, especially when we realized that most of our customer base was women anyway, either buying for, significant others or relatives or friends, or even themselves. Those first 4 solid colognes that we came out with, we probably sold 40% of those to women for themselves, just because they loved the way they smelled.
Nice.
And again, we never really specifically, or at least not often, said, hey, we're a dude store. But that was definitely the vibe given off.
Sure.
But again, I think some of the other things that we have that aren't a good that are made, like the shirts and any of the artwork that is a little more comedic, that draws everyone in, because what's that? I'm gonna check this funny place out, and then they see and smell and talk to me or whoever was working and get the whole story. And at that point, it started drawing everyone in. So we started making the jump into maybe things that were a little less, gender specific, maybe a little more unisex. I also never really wanted to specifically say like, oh, this is just for women or anything like that. It was just, here's a different option, maybe a more floral option, or a racerback t-shirt that maybe not a lot of guys will wear.
Sure. Yeah.
But having, here and there more and more other options.
Yeah. And I think it's smart. I mean, obviously we can make generalizations about gender and things like that, but men can tend to be difficult to shop for, or you don't know what they want necessarily or what they need. And I know I can be hard to shop for.
You and me both.
Yeah. But if something is well made, and, I just feel like you do have gifts for everybody, and just kind of finding something of quality, which everything there is of quality. It does make the perfect gift, because even if it's something that you have already, this is going to be a better version of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And once we started growing beyond just things we made, because it was definitely only things that the two of us were making for at least the first year.
That's a lot of pressure. Yeah,
it is, especially when, shockingly people really like it and are buying a lot of them.
Yeah.
Figuring out how to keep up with that demand. That was fun. But that sort of turning point of realizing, okay, I think it's necessary now to start branching out into either, manufactured and sort of white label products that, still say Freehand on them, but we didn't necessarily make them because it's outside of our realm of expertise. And then even beyond that, starting to bring in other brands that fit, into our branding and our sort of lifestyle. That started really getting us into that territory of, I guess, gift shop, and being known as a really great place to buy gifts for maybe the person that's hard to buy for, because I feel like in this day and age, we offer a lot of things that maybe are a little more general in addition to the very specific things that we do make and sell.
Yeah.
But a lot of them, as mentioned, sort of being hopefully not so much of a novelty, but having that sort of humorous aspect, or even just fun in general.
Yeah.
That
Florida needs to not take itself so seriously, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the only way to really stay sane and
I
stay
agree.
here.
Yeah.
It seems.
You have to balance, your natural cynicism with humor. I mean, it's just sort of like, well, I know this thing isn't perfect and I can hate on it, or I can just kind of like make fun with it, and
Absolutely.
yeah, you got to do that with Florida.
Laugh at yourself, laugh with it, laugh with others.
Yeah. And celebrate it too. It's like there are some genuine things that people do love about Florida. And I think that you and I both share that as well. It's like, that's where this podcast came from. Like, I want to celebrate the things that are really cool here, and that's what keeps people here rather than moving out, is that love and that like dedication to this place.
Absolutely. I mean, that's you hit it right. Perfect with that. Especially again, in this day and age of the sort of what we've cultivated here as far as the community. I mean, gosh, there's so much going on now. Anything you're looking for or want, or want to eat or anything like that, you can find almost anything in the however many zip codes entails Orlando these days,
or even just in this neighborhood too. I mean, most weekends
Absolutely.
We find ourselves just not even leaving this neighborhood.
And the Audubon Park, the Garden District, I think it's one of the most shining examples of that sort of maturity, because as of right now, everything on this one strip of road that isn't someone's house is pretty awesome.
It is. Yeah.
And there's a lot of awesomeness, and there's thankfully and happily, there's not really a lot of competition. Like I said, we all do something different, it seems, and that fills a lot of gaps and a lot of needs of the people of Orlando and this neighborhood.
And there's a lot of collaboration as well. A lot of businesses that will add a product from another business to elevate their own and to advertise them. It's like that sort of sharing customers and getting new customers, because I think of like Gideon's and Kelly's, and they do like the ice cream over at Disney Springs now. Yep. And it's like you can get Kelly's ice cream there, even though Kelly's doesn't have a presence at Disney Springs. And like, that's such a cool thing of like, hey, come with me, do this,
Absolutely.
We're doing this thing.
Yeah, we're all buddies helping each other out.
Yeah, as it should be, right?
Be able to keep doing these things we do and the things we love.
Well, that's what a community is, and that's what we're getting back to, is that like quality of life, and that's what makes this neighborhood so desirable, is people want that, and people want the walkability. East End is such a cool hub for community and for food, and I love that upstairs the Neighbors has kind of expanded that retail experience, right? And you guys have some stuff up there as well?
Well, actually, the Neighbors is more or less ours.
So it's kind of your second location, but it's just upstairs at East End, yeah?
Pretty much exactly. Only we actually specifically don't have a lot of freehand stuff in there. Okay. That has been brought to life by my business partner Jacob and his fiancee Brittany. It's their sort of brainchild, the retail and bar sort of combination.
I still haven't been up there. Like I need to do it. I've talked about it a lot, but I'm a poser. I haven't been there.
Even just beyond promoting, my buddy's business. I think you really should, because it's something that we're all very proud of, and they should definitely be proud of. It's a beautiful space. The build out was amazing.
Yeah.
And it's one of my, even though I don't have a whole lot to do with the Neighbors now, it's still one of my most prideful points, because when Jacob and I first started Freehand, from day one, always said, if this ever works, somehow magically, and we get to a point where we can do this, I would really love to be a stepping stone for other artists and artisans. So it doesn't take them 15 years, you know, to make something out of what they want to do with all their time.
That's so cool.
Because it's not easy. It's really hard, you know.
Yeah.
Something like a brick and mortar store, that takes money, dedication of quite literally all your time, and a lot of things like that that very few people can really, you know, afford. And like I said, we got where we are because of the help that we did receive, and I guess a little bit of, you know, good work ethic and
of course,
and some talent here and there.
It's not just the one thing, but that location, you know, is everything. Or it's not everything, but it's most of it.
It's a lot of things.
It's sort of like,
really
you know, if you're going to have something that is sustainable, you've got to have that customer traffic. And if you're just like a one-stop shop, it's hard to compete with box stores, right? Because people are at Target anyways, you know.
Yeah.
But like when they're there for, you know, the food, and then there's only a couple like retailers, there's basically you and Porch Therapy, which is non-food and gifts and things like that. You've got a captive audience.
Absolutely. And it, exactly like you're saying, it puts eyes on, you know, people's products that might otherwise only have, you know, the ability to show to people once a month or something. You know, people have kids, people have pets, people have jobs and other lives, and not everyone can do, you know, every single farmer's market, you know, that exists in a month,
right?
Because that's a big time devotion, especially if it's like if you're going to be somewhere for 8 or 12 hours and possibly make one sale. But you know, maintaining that work ethic just because you know you're getting eyes on your product, that's a big dedication. It's a big ask.
Yeah.
And so it really helps to have somewhere like the Neighbors, which was the ultimate coming together of that original idea.
That's so cool.
Because, you know, for anyone that doesn't know, the Neighbors is completely stocked with only locally made goods, pretty much. Central Florida, Orlando, a couple pulled, you know, from farther reaches of Florida, but mostly, you know, right here, home based.
Yeah, and a lot of Florida themed stuff, from
Absolutely.
what I understand too. I've seen videos and photos, but maybe I'll go there today. So I'm gonna fix this. I'm overdue.
It's fun.
It's
you
just
should.
right there. Yeah.
I can say that, as you probably well know, being right across the street, the market's pretty crazy on a weekend day.
That's true.
So it's good that you can walk there.
It is. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I do usually avoid it on weekends just because that's for other people that travel here, and it's, you know, where they spend the day. It's great that it's that way.
It really is. But I'm the same way with you. Thankfully, I've worked hard enough to have the luxury of now having the weekends off. And I avoid having to go to the shop at all costs if I don't need to.
Yeah. Talk to a million people and do the whole thing, be on.
I mean, let alone find a parking spot.
That is one of the biggest complaints in the district. It's
just like, I mean, what are we going to do about it? There's only so much land.
Yeah.
So it being a complaint, I feel like is, I don't know.
I mean, we have all of this residential parking. Yeah. I mean, I think that people are very used to being able to park and see the place they're going within their line of sight. And it just takes a little creativity to say, oh, there's all this street parking in the neighborhood that's totally legal. I mean, not behind East End because the roads are so narrow. And I know that like on every social media post, they're like, please don't anger our neighbors by parking where it's illegal to park and all of these things. But, you know, in Audubon Park, there's all this street parking and you can walk a couple blocks. It's totally fine to do that.
There really is. And, you know, while I do say that's, you know, I avoid going there on the weekends because I will usually have to park, I don't know, 5 blocks away. That's only because I know I'm going there to, you know, drop off one bag or something.
Sure.
You know, for the 30 seconds I'm going to be there. So I'll just tell myself I can wait till Monday.
Yeah.
But if you're actually doing anything at all, it's very much worth, you know, having quote unquote to park, you know, in the many spots that are available by the school, for example.
Exactly. And now that we have the crosswalk here too, it's even more feasible, huge. You know.
So much easier. But that, you know, it's what, a 6-minute walk maybe from that to the East End Market.
Yeah.
And that affords you the ability and opportunity to see exactly how much life there is on this street and how much is going on. And more than likely what you're missing out on.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it just takes a little imagination.
Yeah.
And also it is very walkable, these plazas. There's a lot to see, and every shop is worth going into.
Absolutely.
It's very
100%.
everything's very unique, and like people just they care so much about what they have, and it's not just stuff that you can buy on Amazon. It's like, it's like
Yeah.
like vintage stuff and handmade stuff that is, you have to come here for it, and that's so great.
Absolutely. And it's the same idea that, made it possible for me to make as many motorcycle seats as I did, which are incredible labors of love and are incredibly expensive. People never minded because they knew they were going to be the only person in the whole world that has this thing. Because they told me exactly and specifically how they wanted to make it and what artwork was going to be tooled on it.
Yeah.
Because I used to do a lot of that, the hand tooling. Not so much anymore, but that is a similar idea to a lot of what you can get, locally. And most of the handmade stuff, you can know securely that you're going to have something that, not everyone else is going to have. The stranger next to you, on the street isn't going to have the exact same thing that you have, and no longer, sort of feel special the way, I don't know, any purchase really should.
Plus, you can say, I know the guy that made this, and like,
absolutely,
that he's a great guy.
I mean,
it's kind of awesome.
I don't know, what that feels like or how, how good of a thing that is to be able to say, but I love that other people think that.
Yeah. Well, and
it blows my mind, but
it is, and I think that really is a testament to how unique it is. You know what I mean? It's like with food, it's easier to have that connection because who made those recipes. And, I think about Gideon's all the time, just those cookies that he took so long to perfect the recipe, and he cares so much about quality control. And it's like, you're going to get a stellar cookie every time.
Absolutely. And people like supporting something that isn't a faceless entity,
right.
Regardless of, how, perceived in quality the product might be, it still feels better, like, I don't know, to buy something or eat somewhere and, you can look back and you see the chef and you're like, wow, that's a real human being who made this amazing thing.
Yep. And you can't get anything exactly like that because it really comes from them, and it like
truly
they've taken the time to perfect their craft and make it great every time, and like that. Yeah, I think that's what people are gravitating towards because we miss that connection. And it's like, if you're going to be spending money on something, it should come with a level of quality, and like, it's worth a little extra money to get that quality. So I think a lot of people do realize that, especially a lot of the customers at East End, because everything in there does have that level of care to it.
Absolutely. And all of it's very obvious too in the product and in the process and in the presentation, even something as simple as that. And I really think that's the beauty of a city like this and of our city specifically. And again, this very compacted area is that kind of love, like that kind of support and want to support like that.
Yeah.
We would be nowhere without that. And it's really amazing.
True. Yeah. I mean, or we would be like some other places. And I think that this really is a model for the kind of community that, it's a lifestyle in itself, and that's especially what Freehand provides is like, these are lifestyle products. Like, it just, it makes things better, right?
It really does. And it makes a lot of things easier too. I guess, the example would be, or not example, but I don't know, the idea is, if your lifestyle is, of the Freehand style lifestyle, then you can get a lot of what you need in your life here.
Yeah.
Because, in these days we have so many things and they all fit under that sort of umbrella of, Florida and Florida pride and comedy Florida, and simultaneously beautiful, gorgeous wildlife Florida.
Yeah, absolutely.
With the help of Veronica Steiner, of course, because her artwork is absolutely mind-blowing.
Yeah. So how did you hook up with her?
That was one of the best things I probably think could have ever happened to us. There was a period of time where I was working the East End store, which was the only one we had at that point, solely, pretty much 7 days a week, open to close, while Jacob was out on the road doing events all across the state, as far as we could get, basically, and it's
These
still
are like
be
pop-up
feasible.
shops around the state, basically, or
It was actually mostly like markets, like monthly markets that happen, consistently in various other cities, sort of like the evening exchange at the East End Market, how it's once a month, it's a bunch of local vendors, and it's only one night, but it happens every single month. There are quite a few of those going on in places sort of similar to East End Market, bigger marketplaces that have many under one roof. And we had actually found a great bit of support in the Tampa Bay, St. Pete area.
Okay.
So we were doing a lot of those events, and that happens to be where V. Steiner is based. And so she was fairly consistently at these events also set up. And, Jacob would talk to her and appreciate her artwork and the kind of things she was doing, because all of her artwork is solely focused on Florida wildlife and Florida, flowers and plants and things like that.
Habitats, plants, animals.
That's a better word.
Yeah. It's about the environment, right? I mean, it's
absolutely
like we're immersed in this thing, and it's, being at one with nature, not just trying to take it over, like kind of letting it be part of us, or being part of it, really.
And that was something that we would always kind of wanted to and would have loved to portray, I guess, get across in our brand and products and anything. So it seemed only natural to ask her to maybe, do a couple designs for us. And she actually knew who we were already and loved everything we were doing, the Florida vibe and all that, basically being a different version of the same thing that she's doing. So she did a couple designs for us, and it was just so natural with her. It was such a perfect union, so symbiotic, in that we could give her our, goofball ideas, and then she would make them into something amazing and very, clearly professional. And we stuck with it, and eventually decided that she was going to be our one person. She's now our official in-house artist, and there's no one else.
I love the onesie that's like the Florida Wrestling Club. And it's like wrestling gaiters?
Yep, absolutely.
Is it children wrestling gaiters on it?
So there are a couple different versions of it. The mainstay, the staple, is the Florida Wrestling Club is basically the Florida family.
Okay.
And so it's like mom, dad, child, dog. I think there's even a cat on one of them. All pretty much wrestling a gator.
Which is how it is here. It's accurate.
Truly, that is how we all live. We ride gators to work, and
right. Everybody knows that doesn't live here, right? That's how they view us.
They definitely assume that. Hurricanes every day.
Of course. And so some other things that you carry: pocket knives, barware. I love the lunch boxes.
That's a brand new one.
Oh man, that's so cool.
That was a fun one. That kind of stemmed from this idea that we were, I don't know, a big enough company now, I guess, to start. I don't even really know how to talk about it, honestly.
Well, there's lots of cool parents that want like cool stuff for their kids, right?
Yeah, and that was what I was trying to get to. The idea of back to school, basically.
Yeah.
We're like, we should try to do things for that, because we know for a fact that a lot of our customers are parents.
Yeah.
We're selling onesies and bibs and whatnot.
Sure.
And we see them. They bring them into the shop all the time, and it's one of my favorite things is seeing all the freehand kids.
Yeah.
It's just so much fun. But I digress. It was again, it was specific to that. We wanted to have a specific offering for back to school, and it coincided with a couple other products as well. And with the monthly giveaway that we do, I had made this sort of like very intricate hand-tooled leather pencil case.
Oh, wow.
What we were calling it.
Yeah.
Everyone I showed it to either wanted it for themselves or said it looked like it would be the perfect makeup bag.
Okay. Yeah.
So I have to assume that whoever won it did in fact use it for something more along those lines, but its intention was back to school.
Yeah. Are there other like leather goods that you haven't yet made that you're like interested in branching out and doing?
Yes, but no, I guess.
Okay. You've carved out your like niche of like, or niche, I don't know, however you want to say it. The things that you enjoy making and are good at, and you don't necessarily desire to branch out because you just kind of have that.
I guess that's why I say yes and no. I do have the desire. We we always do, want to bring in new leather products. But at this point now, still yet, that happens so seldom that it's not necessarily something we have planned out. A lot of times, whenever I have designed and we've released new leather products, it's been, a spur of the moment inspiration.
Cool.
Or I don't know, I saw something somewhere that I liked and was like, I bet that would be cool if it was leather. And then I figure out, how I would have to change it to even make it possible to build out of leather. So it's usually a lot more in the moment like that, not so planned out. Though over the years we have cycled through quite a few products outside of our sort of core offering, and some have stayed and some have not, and a lot of it, well, I guess all of it has to do with performance, basically. Because with the type of leather I use, there's only so far I can go as far as the types of products and goods that I can make.
Is that like the thickness, or is it what makes it different?
It is that. A large part is the thickness, and then the temper of the vegetable tan leather is a lot more stiff than something, say, like a garment weight leather that you would make like a purse or like a jacket out of. Like it doesn't like to fold a lot.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I had chosen that, so many years ago, because that's the longevity product. That's the one that becomes the heirloom thing in your family. But so as per that, a lot of anything that we've ever made for Freehand has always been somewhat similar, mostly, again, by limitations of the substrate's ability, basically. So then at that point, I enjoy making all of it. Everything I've ever made, I always enjoy, because I get that thrill, no matter how many times I make the same exact thing, of finishing it up and looking at it and being really stoked that it looks exactly like the one I made before, because I have the process so ingrained in me now. And that's where I get my sort of pride from, which you definitely have to have when you're not doing custom stuff, because it truly is the same 300 or however many products that I make over and over and over, just in different colors. But I still love it. So any of those products that had gotten cycled out were just because they didn't perform. And it was, again, we do things and make things that we like.
Yeah.
And then so the hope is that someone else is going to like them, and they don't always, and that's okay. Some have stuck around, and then as we go on, it will probably be about that same process. I'll think of a random thing that I think this will probably be good. Let's see how that does. And that's also the beauty of making it yourself, is that I don't have to come up with this idea and then have some factory make them that has a minimum order quantity of like 10,000.
Yeah.
And I sell one all year.
Because that would be, I mean, that's sort of the model for a lot of products that are out there, right?
Yeah, that's the basis for, I don't know, all retail pretty much. So it is really nice to be able to make, I could literally make just one of something and put it on the shelf and see how long it takes to sell. And if, if it sells that day, it's okay, maybe I'll make two.
Yeah.
And then if those sell quickly, okay, we'll try a whole color run, and then blah, blah, blah. It just keeps going and going.
That's a great advantage.
It really is. Prototyping and modeling, all that. It can all happen on the fly. There's no waiting.
Yeah.
And again, no waste of not only money, but just material,
Right.
Like if we buy 10,000 of something and it doesn't sell, well, what are most companies going to do? Probably just throw it away. Yeah. And that's, there's a good chance a lot of those things are like plastic or something, that's not great to have, it's just sitting in a landfill forever.
It's really not.
It's very wasteful, and it wasted, the time of whoever's life that labored to make that product, and et cetera, et cetera. It goes on and on as far as waste is concerned. So I really like that part of it too. Yeah.
And you guys work with Conservation Florida, which is an organization that is about land protection and
absolutely
eco-friendly.
Brand saves land.
Yeah. I think that's what we need to be supporting, because there's not a lot of that in kind of the retail world, but there should be. It's like all of the vintage and resale shops here are about making sure things don't get put in landfills.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
That they find a new life and a new home, and we have enough things. We don't need to. It's interesting just when you kind of rethink that, and if you are adding something to your life, is it the quality that you want it to be, and is it who's making these things? It's like
absolutely.
It's important.
And as far as the charitable work, it feels good to know exactly where you're donation, your money, your effort is going. And that's a large part of why we started making these donations. We started a couple of years ago, actually. Once we hit a point where, we were fine with what we were able to pay ourselves.
Yeah.
We're not here to get rich or anything.
Sure.
We can live happily and do the things we want. And so we decided to start, giving back as best we could. And the most obvious thing to us seemed to be the, Florida wildlife, basically, and Florida natural life. And so we've gone through a few different charities now. We usually pick one, run with them for about a year or so, or however long they'll let us, and we do a monthly donation every single month.
That's awesome.
At first, it started out with like a percentage of sales for the month is given, and wonderfully somehow we got to a point where we could just set a number, and we just donated that every month, no matter what.
Wow.
Because you do have to grow as a business, so we started making more money rather than just give more away. We were like, hey, maybe we get employees. Maybe we don't have to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So a little bit of help here and there. But again, still able to maintain that monthly donation. That's been one of the most incredible things for us, to be able to do that, to be able to give back like that. It's really awesome. And then we do similar donations to other charities as well. One Heart, Zebra Coalition.
And these are locally based charitable organizations that are doing.
They are, yes. And they do various work with various, groups. We'll do at least one of those every year. And one of the bigger ones is One Heart for Women and Children. It usually ends up being around the holidays. We do basically the whole weekend. And we'll let everyone know, all the sales from this weekend go to One Heart. And people really, really come out in droves to support that.
That's awesome. What does that organization do?
They support women and children, basically single mothers that have found themselves in difficult situations. Probably put two and two together on that.
Yeah.
And you're just struggling to get back on their feet. And that really hits home with me, because if an organization like that existed when I was a kid, I might have had a little bit of a better childhood, because that was the exact scenario. Single mother.
Very familiar with that story.
Absolutely.
And that experience.
And I know exactly how difficult it can be. So it really spoke to me. And they go full force on it. I mean, they do so much.
What a way to be able to give back to,
It really is. It's like the cyclical nature of it's almost karmic, maybe.
Well, and that's what we put into things. Like, we want to be able to do those things that are like truly coming from the heart, and that's what sustains us, because, we can get caught in the daily grind of doing something and maybe get tired of doing something, but it's like there's a greater purpose to it. And also it's like these things are making people really happy, and they're improving the quality of people's lives. And you're giving back to these organizations that are literally saving people from distress.
Absolutely.
Right?
And just to be able to be even a small fraction of anything that is bringing joy to people in the world, and, making people happy to be living this life, or, in other circumstances, as far as retail, stoked on the things they have, or how they're able to, decorate their house or whatever, or dress their kids.
Yeah.
But just bringing that joy, that's like such a huge thing for me, because we get so much joy out of doing this. It's very hard work, and it almost never ends.
Yeah.
But I've, in the 6 years that we basically have existed, I've never once hated my job. And I can't say that about any job I've ever had in the 34 years prior to that.
That's amazing. Yeah. Yeah. And that is so important, just to have something that you can sustain. It's like you could do this for the rest of your career, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you have more autonomy, because you're not working for somebody else. It's like, who your customers are. You can kind of tailor things to make sure it's still working. Like, you have to run a viable business, but branching out and reaching out to other artists and elevating their things too. It's like you have this reputation and this name that people recognize. Yeah, and like that's
I still find that hard to believe.
I know.
Apparently, it's true, because I hear it a lot from people, so it
Sure.
must be on some level.
Yeah, yeah.
And like you're saying, it harkens back to seeing a boring band or something. At its core, joy begets joy.
Yeah, that's such a good.
It would
point.
feel almost selfish for me to enjoy what I do all the time so much and not try to spread that, you know? And very wildly somehow what I do happens to, you know, to do that, and then to make other things possible that do that. And again, to be that stepping stone for other artists to, you know, live their joy.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
That's an amazing feeling.
It is. It is. I think it's so interesting too that like both you and Steve Lewis of Gideon's come from this music background, that like you both toured and had bands and did the thing. What bands were you in back in the day?
Oh man, let's see. First one was Summer Lane, and I was in a band called Sincerely Yours for a little while. That was around the same time that Gabriel existed.
Yes. Did we play shows together?
I don't think we ever actually did.
Okay.
That was a relatively short-lived band. We did a couple shows with Carlisle, Song of Kerman.
Yeah. And I played with Song of Kerman for a little while too.
Oh my God, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Wow, what a hilariously small town.
I mean, it's amazing that we didn't know each other better because we were like in the same scene. But, you know, I think back then you're a little more insular. It's like you kind of had your like crew that you hung out with, and like,
oh yeah, I mean,
even though it was a social scene, it's like you go to a show and you just hang out with the people you know, and then you leave.
It was pre-technology essentially, you know, like the internet existed, but there definitely wasn't iPhones,
right?
And you know, this ability to literally find anyone you want to connect with anywhere.
Yeah. It took longer. Like you couldn't just friend them and like look through their feed. It's
very
something
organic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Funny enough, I always think about too how much of it had to do with what school you went to.
Yes.
Like I didn't know a lot of people that didn't go to my school. I only really made a few friends that went to, what was it, university, I guess. And it was because of, you know, the local music scene, just going to shows and be like, hey, you know, I've seen you 20 times now.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your name?
We should probably have a conversation at this point. Yeah. If we're going to keep doing this. Yeah.
And this exact dynamic that we have right now, I've had with a lot of people.
Yeah.
That I knew way, you know, oh boy, 20-something years ago.
Like a different life, right? It's like I was a different person then.
I just never got to know them like at all. Like I might have known their name even.
Yeah.
Or I, you know, had a friend who knew them, and then I meet them now in this whole other world, you know. And we're all, like I said, we're all like running our own businesses and, you know, building this, I guess, other version of a scene, basically.
We are,
more community.
Yeah, it's like a change of context, and, you know, we've kind of find our way to have creative outlets. And like, I love that there are things that we can do that don't necessarily have to become our job, but, you know, we can still kind of contribute to the narrative. And I think creative people just, no matter what you have to create, you have to do something, that you have to find your outlet. And it doesn't have to be just one thing either. You can do all sorts of things if you have the time and the energy and the interest in doing it. But I think it's such a beautiful thing too when somebody does find that they can make a career out of the thing they love, that artistic outlet also is viable for.
God, absolutely.
It's wild.
You said it. It's very wild because I think a lot of us had at least one or a couple things that we've been doing for a very long time. And again, that the social mindset just wasn't there yet to do something like make a career out of it.
Yeah.
So then for that to happen, it's so mind-blowing.
And I think, you know, coming from a musical background too, we're sort of very accustomed to the idea that all of that time that you're putting into it isn't going to yield like any money. Like you're not going to be able to live off of that. And I have some friends that do, and it's amazing, you know, to know anybody that's able to make that work. And I mean, it should be supportable. It should be, you know, we should be celebrating our musicians and other artists more than we do. But it's a difficult life.
It really is. And I think that so truly speaks to what you're saying about it being a need. Like we have to do it. Like it's not something we don't only want to do it. We have to.
Yeah. You can't turn it on and off, but you can channel it, right? It's like it's got to go somewhere.
And we all still did it, even though it was fruitless. And for the most part, we knew it was going to be. You know, there were no real expectations of it. I don't think at least any of us that were realistic about it ever thought that, oh yeah, I'll be playing music for the rest of my life, and then I'll be a rock star or whatever, playing arenas or
But
or even be able to pay my rent doing it.
Yeah, I mean, we went to those dive bars and those small like house shows and warehouses and things like that, and it's like that is like where the magic happened, and like that you can't put a price tag on that experience. Like we wanted to be part of that, so that's what we were doing with our youth.
Absolutely.
Right?
And we were, I mean, realistically, essentially, just by way of continuing the tradition, we were also creating it.
Yeah.
Because we had to create, and by all of us continuing to do it, it was living on.
Yeah.
I guess in a way.
And understanding like what it meant to have a scene, right? And how important it is to be supportive of it. It's like you got to show up to those shows, you got to buy that merch, like that's the only way to keep these artists like fed and alive and like doing this. Like
absolutely,
everybody's got to have their day job if they can't sustain with just their art. And I think that we lose a lot of art because of that,
Yeah, and unfortunately, we all do age. So there comes a point where you kind of can't do both anymore physically, or at least not nearly as much as you would like to.
Right. Or an injury even.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
Yeah.
One of the things I really like about what you're talking about with the, creating a scene, being part of the local scene, that was one of the, maybe not the first place I was told you should do this, but one of the first places that we all exemplified the idea of not being exclusive. That inclusivity, like we accepted everyone, like because we all had that common ground of like, didn't even have to be the same style of music or anything. It wasn't even that specific. It was just, hey, we like music, we like playing music, we like seeing music, and then various other things, Food Not Bombs, even punk rock prom, things like that.
Yeah,
that brought us all together, and we wanted as many people to be a part of that as possible. And, it wasn't like oh, hey, only you type of person can do this with us. It was, and I mean, shoot, that spawned like the rest of my life.
Yeah,
my belief system, basically.
Yeah, same. I'm so grateful for that. It always makes me so happy to think about it, and just to know people that were in that, and that it meant the same thing to them, and that we can carry that energy over into another community and like do something else with it, and continue that spirit. I think Absolutely. It's so important.
It's one of the most beautiful things, man. I tell you.
It is.
I still have all my equipment, but I probably haven't touched a guitar for 10 years.
Yeah.
I always want to. I just don't really.
I know. I got my drums set up. I like rarely, like sometimes I'll like listen to music and play along with it. And I think that
might be about the extent of it.
Yeah. I think that there's always that desire, and always that like almost kind of guilt, that you're not practicing this thing, or like doing
there's a lot of guilt,
right? Isn't there? Like it's I people don't talk about it much, but I think that
it's the same reason why I haven't sold any of my equipment. It does nothing but collect dust, and I could easily probably get thousands of dollars for it, but I can't bring myself to do it. Again, out of guilt, knowing exactly the size of the effect it had on my life.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a small part of me that thinks that, maybe one day there's going to be something's going to happen. I'm going to make a new friend or something, and be like, oh, hey, I play bass. And like, oh, this other guy just met played drums, and I've been playing guitar forever.
Yeah.
Like, what if we just like, I never really liked this word, but jammed.
Are we talking about we're going to start a band? I think we are.
Is this happening?
This is official. We're announcing to the world, or anybody listening. Yeah. All right. Cool.
I hope you're ready.
All right.
It's going to be a very specific sound.
I think we're overdue. Like that guilt doesn't really do anything good for us.
Yeah, not at all.
No.
It basically just propagates itself.
Yeah. We can mask it or try to avoid it, but it's always there. It's always looking at us, right?
At the very least, thankfully, we have now found other things that bring us, a similar amount of joy. But it's definitely a different feeling.
It is,
because I do, especially at least what I do. It's up until very recently, it was very singular. It was something I did by myself, and it kind of had to be that way because it takes a long time to teach someone how to help someone like me.
Yeah.
There's really no like easy parts to something like a handcraft.
And you learned kind of the hard way by just
Yeah.
doing and working it out. So like
Yep.
thinking about a lesson plan and how you're going to teach other people.
It's made it difficult to teach other people.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of things that I forgot how I figured out because I've been doing it for so long. And then, so to me, it's like when I try to explain it, I want to say, I don't know, you just do it. It just like makes sense. Like, I don't know how to tell you this.
Yeah.
Because I've forgotten like the sequence of events that, led me to the aha moment.
Yeah.
And it was just, I don't know, it just seems, it's like logical.
And that's sort of like a practice of, being empathetic to somebody who is starting out and like seeing it from their perspective of
Absolutely.
like, what would I not know that I would need to be taught? So it like kind of bolsters your own knowledge because you're like, I need to be able to teach. And it's so cool that you do that.
It keeps everything fresh. And I mean, I've gone through now 5 apprentices and I have 3 currently.
Mm-hmm.
And I've remembered things that I didn't even knew I knew.
Yeah.
I had forgotten and or like you're saying, basically learned new things,
Mm-hmm.
new ways of doing things that are still just as good.
Yeah.
But having, that other mind in there at those fledgling stages, wherein they're asking questions, they're asking all the questions, like how does this little thing work that doesn't matter at all? And to then have to revert back to thinking about,
and rethinking
the how of it.
Yeah. It's like I've done it this way this whole time, but then when you rethink it, you're like, oh, I could do it this way, and that's maybe better.
It's interesting because a lot of times they teach me.
That's cool.
Because I can, I'll lay the process out, one very tiny part before them, and I'll see the gears turning in their head, and their, own personal form of logic, they get to an answer and let's say, oh, so like I do this because this, and then I say to myself like that wasn't how I got to it, but yeah. That's exactly it.
Wow.
That's awesome. Thank you. Now I know what to say to the next person.
That's so cool.
So it's been a really fun process. Admittedly a little difficult because of the physical setup. Currently, Jacob and I no longer work in the stores unless we're covering for someone. We have our own office actually upstairs at East End Market.
Okay.
That's, part his office, part my workshop, and then all of the basically warehouse for our online inventory.
That's so convenient to have it all there.
It really is.
Wow.
That was another very lucky situation we found ourselves in.
Yeah.
But because of that, I'm by myself there. My apprentices are always working in the stores because I left my whole workshop behind at the Hourglass store, which was our second store that we opened and where I made my sort of home base. I left all that behind and built a new one here at East End Market. So that's where my apprentices all work. They work with all my older equipment. And the only way I can really teach them is, on my time off, basically, to go there and try to work them through these very tedious processes that have to be kind of learned one at a time because, one is the stepping stone for the next one and that and so on. But having the weekends off does make that a little more feasible.
Yeah.
But it would be a lot easier if, and I guess hopefully when we get to a point where the whole team that I have working with me, that's all we do. None of them, they don't man the stores anymore, which is what they currently do.
Right.
They're doing, their apprentice work while they're manning the shops.
And this is all in creating more product essentially. And I mean, obviously as you're training apprentices, they might go off and do their own thing, but there's plenty to go around, right? Because what you do is so rare and specialty. Yeah.
It is. And there's so much you can do with it. It's one of the funnier points that I often have to make to people. If I'm meeting them for the first time and they're talking to me and they see what I do and like, well, this must be really awesome for you because there's no one else doing this, right? And I'm like, well, yeah, there actually is a lot, especially
don't see
around
it out there
the world.
much. Yeah.
But I mean, even here, right in Orlando, there are 5 other dudes doing exactly what I do with their own companies. And but the beauty of it is that it's such a varied type of craft that we all kind of do something a little different. So none of us really compete with each other.
That's cool.
And it's been really awesome.
Yeah.
And I've met all of them over the years, or most of them at least. And we've talked shop and have a great time, and we're all friendly with each other. And we even actually refer people to one another who are looking maybe for something that we don't do, but I know they do. So
Yeah.
I can send them over
You
there,
got
and
that
that's been really
leather
awesome.
connection.
Yeah, absolutely.
Huh.
But it is definitely a world that if you don't know about it, you definitely don't know about it.
Yeah.
It's it's very specific, and it's not something you can like learn overnight. Like, oh, I found this like leather blog, and I've been following it for like 3 weeks, and now I know everything about leather. It's
Yeah.
kind of not really the case, and it doesn't happen so much more. But in the beginning, it did actually happen a lot. That people would come in and they would ask me questions about like, oh, what type of leather you're using, and then they would spout off the name of like certain tanneries that they had heard that are like the more well-known ones, and I would have to laugh. I'm like, no, well, it's similar, but it's this other one, and then they would ask me about like the tannage and the finishing process, and I would answer however I answered, and they would like contradict what I said, say, well, no, this is this because blah, and I was like, oh, well, I mean, I don't. Did you like read that somewhere or something?
Yeah.
Because it's not true actually. Like this is the reality of it.
These like armchair experts, right? These people.
Yeah, yeah, big time. And it's usually something that they've gotten, because I've asked them about, like, oh, where did you learn what you know? Like, you know a lot more than the average person, and they would tell me these varied other forms that weren't leather specific, like a leather craft or leather working form. It was like this one particular blog that's dedicated to like shoes or something that are leather, made of leather, but it's a shoe website realistically, or a form or whatever. And so they would get these little tidbits here and there of quote unquote knowledge, and then they hold fast to them, and that's what they go around spouting off to the craftsman like me who does know about it. And I never really knew how to answer them because I didn't want to be like, no, dummy.
Well, and I think that
no one likes to be told that they're wrong. So
right. Well, some people just want to be like right about something, or just like they feel challenged by somebody who's like really good at something, and they're like, well, I'm good at that too.
Yeah.
I can do that better than you. So but it's cool that you're doing it.
It's like a real life meme of I consider myself something of a scientist.
Yes,
like,
that's exactly right.
Because you have fancy shoes.
Yes, because I read some stuff on the internet that and now I'm an expert.
Yeah. So
it's cool that we're both experts.
And that was kind of the beginning of realizing, oh, I guess I kind of have like a very specific knowledge of something. Like, a lot of people don't know about this, because to me, I'm just talking normally, and then to other people, it's like this other handbook language,
Yeah. Well, and it
all
is
tech term.
This is like really part of your world, and you're like putting this out in the world in a way that's meaningful, because it's it's reaching these audiences, and it's like it's such a cool thing, and it really is such a throwback to how things used to be done. You had different people who had this craft, and they perfected it, or they became like the best around that, like, because they've done it for so long and they learned so much about it, and people want more of that, and it's cool that you're doing that. So
thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'm just stoked beyond belief that I can do it, and I'm still here doing it, and we're just loving it so much, and it's the greatest feeling knowing that other people love it too.
And you do monthly leather workshops as well?
We used to.
Okay.
We had to slow down and then eventually stop those once we did open the second store, because for a good long while we had 2 stores and still only 2 of us.
Yeah. How does that work?
It was tough for a while. It was just it works exactly how you think it would, just every day, working every day.
Yeah.
And then it was at that point that we slowly actually started finally hiring people, which was a crazy enough milestone to me as it was. And even you had 1 employee for, I don't know, a year.
Yeah.
And that was still wild to me.
And now you're at 10 total, right? Around there?
Yeah. Right around there. And like I said, 3 apprentices, and it's going amazing.
Love it.
Even having these 3 apprentices, they basically do the first parts of the process, essentially. The parts that are a little easier to teach, don't involve any sort of like fine finishing, which is a more a skilled sort of trade aspect of a lot of what I do. So they're like cutting the parts out and sealing whatever edges need to be sealed, and etc., gluing a couple pieces together. and then all the parts come to me, and then I basically build everything from those parts. And then, like I said, do all the fine finishing and whatnot. And even just that little bit of work taken off my plate has made like a world of difference. It's unbelievable the backstock that we have now, being ready and actually prepared to go into something like a holiday season. It's a first, and I pull a drawer open with all the backstock, and I look at it every day, and I'm still just flabbergasted by it. Like,
I love that.
Wow, I can't believe it just took 2 extra people to be able to do this.
Yeah. And you had, you're part of that creation of, training them. So you're expanding production, but like it's still by your hand and by your teachings. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's also a good feeling to be able to pass that feeling on to them. Because even, for someone who's only been with me, say, a week, for as much as or as little as I've taught them at that point, they can still look at that finished product on the shelf and take pride in it because they were an integral part of that process.
Yeah.
Especially since most of what I do have the apprentices doing, I don't do at all anymore.
Cool.
Like I maybe 1 or 2 things here and there I'm actually cutting the parts out for.
Yeah.
It's all them and they're doing it, which is, as trivial as it might sound, that's one of the most important processes because they're the ones picking from the hide where these parts are going to be cut from, because it does have to have a certain look to it, certain level of quality, and
so they're developing their eye for that, right?
Yeah,
that's cool,
and that's a huge part of it.
Yeah,
and it's also, like I said, developing the passion for it.
Yeah,
because it's a lot easier to be passionate about something when you can look at it and take pride in it.
Right.
Compared to, say, if I taught all of my apprentices how to do everything, and then I just stopped doing any part of it altogether. The most pride I could get out of looking at something on a shelf would be, oh, I designed that.
Sure.
Like I thought of that idea.
Yeah. And at that point you're sort of disconnected from it. And that's not where you want to be. Like, you want to have hands on it.
I don't ever want to fully step out of the process.
That's so cool.
I think everybody sort of has somewhere in their mind an ultimate goal of having more free time than work time.
Yeah.
And that
there's a balance.
I'm sure is a way off goal. But
sure.
But yeah, I would never want to be in that position to, or I guess I would like to be in the position to, but I would never physically step away from it 100%.
Yeah.
Again, because of that need, I have to create.
Absolutely.
I have to make things. I love building. I love making things.
Yeah. And I wonder, does most of your business is in person, or how is the online kind of been going as far as branching out?
That's been getting better and better.
Cool.
It is still the smallest percentage of our sales between the 3 outlets.
Okay.
2 stores and a website. But it is now a significant contributor to our overall sales, which definitely wasn't the case in the beginning.
Yeah.
And strangely enough, I think maybe about 6 months in was when we launched a website. It's just like a blog type thing that we had built, basically, one single scrolling
just
page.
A means to an end. Yeah, we have to have some internet presence, right?
And we only offered like a couple things on it because it was still just me making almost everything, Jacob and I.
Yeah.
So, just things that we knew we could keep up with, like T-shirts or something. And we had some sales, but it would be, we had like 1 a day for that first year. It was like a good day on the website. And man, once, if anything good could be pulled out of something like a pandemic, which is impossible, essentially.
Yeah.
Man,
well, we all had to shift our thinking, right? It was
truly,
And
once everyone was just stuck at home all day, let alone, getting like free money from the government, I assume had to do something with it.
Yeah.
Our website went absolutely bonkers. It was crazy.
Wow.
And even there was that sort of couple of month period right at the beginning of lockdown when everyone you had to be closed, like pretty much no business was allowed to be even open.
Yeah.
It started like right on that. And I actually didn't change my work schedule at all. I still went to the shop every day. I just never unlocked the door because that's where my workshop was. It was in the store.
Yeah.
So my workload didn't change at all, if anything, other than increasing.
Yeah.
It was really wild, and
That's
it was
fortunate. Yeah.
We were very incredibly fortunate. We have friends that have businesses that weren't nearly as fortunate, and that was a do or die time for them.
Right.
Incredibly make or break, and just like you're saying, very fortunate to have made it through it. it was a very humbling experience because to then get to the point where, okay, we can, now kind of start to open a little bit, and then more and more here and there, and then more places started opening back up, and people started feeling, safer and probably looking forward to getting back out.
Yeah.
It was in that moment that we really realized, like, wow, if that didn't happen, like, we would be gone. Like, this isn't something you can just like pick back up 6 months later with no sales and still keep rocking. Like, if that didn't happen, that would have been the end, realistically.
Yeah.
Outside of like paying all our bills out of our own pockets just to be able to stay there, and buying all the supplies, buying all the products in general.
But the nice thing too about your products is they do ship, pretty easily. So
Very.
That's definitely a benefit to what you do. And the website that people go to order things and check things out online?
Very simple, www.freehandgoods.com.
Excellent.
Yep, all right there. And the same name actually on all of our socials, which would be Facebook, Instagram, and as of now, TikTok.
Yeah, you guys have a great social media presence. Like, you have a lot of great like videos and demonstrations and things like that.
I definitely credit Jacob for that.
That's awesome.
He's been really awesome at building our social platforms to what they are, and creating this really great voice for us.
Yeah, it's part of that, like, feeling connected to a thing. It's like every time something new comes out and just how it's being showcased, I think that you have a great reach, and that's what kind of sustains it as well, right?
Truly. It's been really wild to see the analytics of it all, like as far as seeing where not only sales but even just on a social platform like likes and whatever watches and all that are coming from, and it's like all over the country and other countries even. It's really mind-blowing, man.
Yeah,
we're
used to this microcosm music scene.
Yeah.
Doesn't really translate in our brains. Like, we have to kind of grow out of that, or like,
if you played a show in Tampa and one person knew your songs, it was like
the biggest thing ever.
Total mind blower.
Just the fact that Gabriel, this band that like played out, we were together for years, but we played shows, a couple dozen shows, and we didn't really tour. So we went to Jacksonville and a couple places, Gainesville. But it's just like the fact that you reached anybody that comes back to you and says, "Oh yeah, I saw your band," and it's really cool. And like,
it's a crazy feeling, and it's a good feeling. And again, that beginning sort of pandemic era is where we really sort of found that out, because we would start seeing these sales, and we did take sort of a dare, I guess, and bumped our ad radius up on Facebook and Instagram to beyond the state of Florida, which is where we had kept it.
Yeah.
And it worked.
That's
I
awesome.
don't really know how, but it did. I assume like Florida expats or something, or they were just people seeing him, and it's so funny to them that I gotta get that shirt. That's hilarious. But yeah, all over the country, and then some of the grooming products even would ship overseas to like barbershops.
Wow.
I didn't even know how to take it. It was so humbling.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and
the how of it all just confused me. I wanted to talk to these people and be like, just so I'm clear, like, how did you find us? Like, how did that even happen?
Yeah, the power of the internet.
Truly, and I have nowhere near the grasp of it that Jacob does. So
yeah,
I credit him for all of that, because he's so great at it. And we did just start the TikTok channel fairly recently, and that's sort of been like I've taken over that arm, or I guess I'll say attempted to, and I can't believe how much work goes into something like maintaining a social media, not only presence, but brand, maintaining how people see you. You
got to make those reels.
Yeah. So I learned. That was a big part of why we even decided to go with the TikTok. Actually, I think we did start it like a year ago and just never did anything with it.
Yeah.
And then one day I was like, I got a phone. Sure, I'll just record myself doing this dumb little thing in the leather process that people are apparently interested in, and they definitely were. So
well, and you're also more ready to accommodate more customers, because you've kind of created this assembly line of skilled workers, and so you're scaling up responsibly, and then
absolutely.
putting it out there.
And that was actually one of the first and hardest real lessons, I guess, as a business owner, at least I had to learn, was knowing when to say that we had hit a plateau. Like, okay, here we are, and we don't know how to scale from here.
Yeah.
With just the two of us.
Yeah. That's a big shift, right? It's like you have to
really
be
is,
paying attention.
Because it involves not only then investment, investment in employees, and even like stockists, like acquiring, various other stores around the country that are carrying your products. You have to have a faith in your ability to keep them supplied,
Yeah.
So that's where, the training comes in. It's very important that everyone that we do train to help us in that aspect can, maintain the same standards that either of us would have when we were making everything. And it's been very, very helpful because it goes beyond even the leather stuff. We teach our East End employees how to do all the candles as well.
Yeah.
Because that is one of the bigger sellers, especially with stockist accounts. And some of them are ordering like 100 candles a month because they're selling them so quickly. And, one person can only make so many candles as quick as they are to make.
Yeah.
And so even just having that one little bit of additional help is such a huge thing. And it enables us to maintain our sort of original core idea, which was for there always to be something happening in the stores.
That makes
Not
sense.
just a person, sitting behind the counter.
Yeah.
Hey, let me know if I can help you. So both stores always have something going on, something being made. And I just feel like that has been a huge part of what enabled us to grow.
Yeah.
Was that intrigue, that pulling back of the curtain.
Right. It's a conversation starter for sure. And to see it's like a demonstration all day long, right?
Absolutely.
That's so cool.
And that's where a lot of the passion is helpful as well. Jacob, my partner, is convinced. I guess I don't see it because I'm the one doing it, but he seems to be pretty convinced that a large part of what built our business initially was just how I spoke to people about, what we do and what I'm doing.
That makes sense.
Which was just passionately,
Yeah. Yeah.
Clearly enjoying what I'm doing makes other people, stoked to be like, all right, I'm going to give you my money then for this product that I now have faith in, and I know exactly who and what went into it.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are doing it right. You really are.
Try to,
Yeah, you've created this thing and people respond to it, and you see that it is very sustainable. You guys will be doing this for as long as everybody is around.
That is definitely the hope.
And that is amazing. I love it.
It really is. Thank you so much.
Seth, thank you so much for taking the time. It was really great talking to you.
Absolutely. Likewise. And thank you so much for having me.
Talk to you soon. Hello APGD, a neighborhood podcast, is brought to you in part by Stardust Video and Coffee, Audubon Park's beloved neighborhood cafe, bakery, bar, and meeting place, located at 1842 East Winter Park Road. We're also sponsored by Red Light Brew Pub. Founded in 2005, Red Light is widely known as the source for world-class imports and microbrews. A wide selection of natural wines, plus award-winning beers brewed in-house. A full kitchen is in the works with an amazing menu by Chef Jess Tantalo. Located at 2810 Corinne Drive, please check out Red Light for all things beer and wine and soon food. Our theme song is by Christopher Pierce, and special thanks to Trey Hester for all of his help in making this podcast a reality. We do hope you enjoyed this episode. If so, please click subscribe and leave a review if you'd like. We'll see you next time.